Peru, Australia, Mexico, Egypt, India. Separated by oceans. Different languages. Different gods. Yet ancient peoples around the world carved the same thing, beings from the sky. Some say these are gods. Mythology. Symbolic art. Others say these are visitors. Extraterrestrials. Evidence of contact. The ancient astronaut theory has captivated millions. But what do the walls actually tell us? The Nazca Desert, Peru. Between 500 BCE and 500 CE, the Nazca people created over 800 straight lines, 300 geometric shapes, and 70 animal figures. Some stretch for miles. The spider, 150 feet long. The hummingbird, 300 feet. Here's the mystery: you can't see them from the ground. They're only visible from the air. Hundreds of feet up. The Nazca people had no aircraft. No balloons. No way to see their own creations from above. So who were they making these for? Ancient astronaut theorists propose a radical answer: they were messages. Runways. Signals to beings in the sky. Maria Reich, who studied the lines for 50 years, had a different theory: astronomy. She argued the lines point to celestial events, solstices, star risings, water sources. But even she admitted, we'll never know for certain. Kimberley region, Western Australia. 40,000 years of Aboriginal rock art. And among the oldest, the Wandjina. Figures with large, round heads. No mouths. Huge eyes. And what looks like helmets with radiating lines. Ancient astronaut theorists call them space helmets. Aliens who visited Australia tens of thousands of years ago. But ask Aboriginal elders, and they'll tell you something different. The Wandjina are creator spirits. Sky beings who brought rain and fertility. The helmets are halos of lightning and rain clouds. The large eyes represent their all-seeing wisdom. They have no mouths because they are so powerful their voices would destroy us. This is where ancient astronaut theory gets complicated. Are we listening to indigenous people's own interpretation of their art? Or are we imposing a Western technological framework, helmets, spacecraft, onto symbols that mean something entirely different? Palenque, Mexico. 683 CE. King Pakal the Great is buried in a massive sarcophagus. The lid, 12 feet long, 7 feet wide, 8 tons of carved limestone. The design is intricate. A figure reclining. Surrounded by symbols. Machinery-like shapes. In 1968, Erich von Däniken published Chariots of the Gods. He described the carving: Pakal is piloting a spacecraft. Hands on controls. Foot on a pedal. Flames shooting from exhaust. The image went viral. It became the icon of ancient astronaut theory. But Maya scholars looked at the same carving and saw something completely different. They could read the glyphs. They understood Maya cosmology. Pakal isn't piloting a spaceship. He's falling into Xibalba, the Maya underworld. The rocket is the world tree, the axis connecting Earth, underworld, and sky. The exhaust is the quadripartite monster, representing the four corners of the world. The controls are jewels and symbols of rebirth. Every element has meaning in Maya religion. Once you understand the context, it's not a spacecraft. It's a map of the cosmos. Abydos Temple, Egypt. Carved into a beam, what looked like a helicopter, a tank, a submarine, and a futuristic aircraft. Photos of this went viral online. Proof ancient Egyptians had advanced technology. Time travelers. Alien visitation. Egyptologists sighed. This is a palimpsest. Carved hieroglyphs that were later plastered over and recarved with different text. Pharaoh Seti I originally carved his name here. His son, Ramesses II, plastered over it and carved his own name. Over 3,000 years, the plaster eroded. The two layers of hieroglyphs overlapped. The helicopter is two glyphs superimposed. The tank is another accidental combination. It's like seeing shapes in clouds, pareidolia. Archaeologists recreated the process. They showed, layer by layer, how the erosion created these shapes. But here's what's interesting: even with a clear explanation, the helicopter hieroglyphs remain one of the most searched mysteries online. Why? Because an accidental pattern isn't as exciting as ancient helicopters. We want the mystery, even when there isn't one. Ancient Sumer. 4000 BCE. The world's first civilization. They invented writing, the wheel, mathematics, astronomy. They built cities when most humans lived in small villages. And they wrote about beings called the Anunnaki. In Sumerian mythology, the Anunnaki were gods who came from the heavens. They ruled over Earth, decreed the fates of humanity, and possessed knowledge beyond mortal understanding. On cylinder seals, small stone cylinders carved with scenes that could be rolled onto clay, the Sumerians depicted the Anunnaki as larger-than-human figures, sometimes with wings, sometimes surrounded by celestial symbols. In the 1970s, author Zecharia Sitchin looked at these cylinder seals and proposed a radical reinterpretation. The Anunnaki weren't gods. They were extraterrestrials. According to Sitchin, the Anunnaki came from a planet called Nibiru, which orbits our Sun every 3,600 years. They came to Earth 450,000 years ago to mine gold. They genetically engineered humans to serve as workers. Everything in Sumerian mythology, the creation of mankind, the flood, the gifts of civilization, was actually ancient history, not mythology. Sitchin's book sold millions. The theory became a cornerstone of ancient astronaut belief. But there's a problem. Sumerian scholars say Sitchin's translations are wrong. Dr. Michael Heiser holds a PhD in Hebrew Bible and Semitic languages. He spent years checking Sitchin's work. His conclusion: Sitchin frequently mistranslated words, took passages out of context, and invented meanings that don't exist in the original texts. For example, Sitchin translated Anunnaki as those who from heaven to earth came. It sounds dramatic. But actual Sumerian scholars say it means princely offspring, the children of An, the sky god, and Ki, the earth goddess. Sitchin claimed a cylinder seal labeled VA243 depicts the solar system with 10 planets, including Nibiru. Experts point out it's not a solar system diagram, it's a star symbol representing a deity, surrounded by smaller dots that appear on hundreds of Sumerian artifacts with no astronomical meaning. Astronomers add that a planet with a 3,600-year elliptical orbit passing through our solar system would create gravitational chaos. The planets wouldn't maintain stable orbits. Earth's climate would be catastrophically disrupted each pass. There's no geological or astronomical evidence for Nibiru. But here's what's true: the Sumerians were incredible astronomers. They tracked Venus with precision. They understood lunar cycles. They created accurate calendars. And they wrote about gods from the sky. Whether those gods were extraterrestrials or powerful mythological beings, that interpretation depends on how you read the walls. Here's what makes the Sumerian case fascinating: they did have extraordinary astronomical knowledge. The Sumerians identified the planets visible to the naked eye: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. They understood the difference between planets and stars: planets wander, stars stay fixed. They calculated the lunar month to within seconds of our modern measurement. They tracked Venus's cycles so precisely they could predict its appearances decades in advance. They divided the sky into constellations, created the zodiac, invented the 360-degree circle, all without telescopes, without modern instruments. So the question becomes, how much did they actually know? And more importantly, how did they learn it? Ancient astronaut theorists say, extraterrestrial teachers. Astronomers say, centuries of careful naked-eye observation by a civilization that valued record-keeping and astronomical prediction for religious and agricultural purposes. Both explanations acknowledge the same fact: the Sumerians were far more advanced than we often give ancient peoples credit for. Sumer wasn't alone. Across the world, separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years, ancient cultures told similar stories. Beings from the sky. Advanced knowledge. Strange visitors who taught humanity. West Africa, the Dogon tribe. Their astronomical knowledge would become one of the most controversial cases in the ancient astronaut debate. The Dogon people of Mali. Population, 400,000. Living in remote villages along the Bandiagara escarpment. For centuries, they've practiced traditional religion, created intricate art, and maintained oral histories passed down through generations. In 1946, two French anthropologists, Marcel Grial and Germaine Dieterlen, published something extraordinary. The Dogon, they reported, had detailed knowledge about the star Sirius. Not just Sirius A, the brightest star in our night sky, but Sirius B, a white dwarf companion star that's completely invisible to the naked eye. The Dogon called it Ptolo. They said it orbits Sirius A every 50 years. They said it's extremely small but incredibly heavy, made of matter more dense than anything on Earth. All of this is true. But here's the problem: Western science didn't discover Sirius B until 1862. Didn't photograph it until 1970. It requires a powerful telescope to see. So how did the Dogon know? According to Grial and Dieterlen's research, the Dogon described Sirius B's properties with remarkable accuracy. They drew diagrams showing its elliptical orbit around Sirius A. They said it takes 50 years to complete one orbit. Modern measurement, 50.09 years. They said it's the smallest yet heaviest thing related to Sirius. True, white dwarfs pack the mass of our sun into something the size of Earth. They said it rotates on its axis. True. They even mentioned a third star in the system, Sirius C, which some astronomers suspect might exist but hasn't been confirmed. The Dogon creation myth explains this knowledge. Beings called the Namo came from the Sirius system. Amphibious creatures, half human, half fish. They arrived in a spinning, descending arc that landed with great noise and wind. They gave the Dogon knowledge of the stars. Ancient astronaut theorists see this as clear evidence extraterrestrials from Sirius visited Earth. But skeptics have another explanation. Anthropologist Walter van Beek spent decades studying the Dogon. He lived in their villages, learned their language, observed their rituals. His findings challenge the ancient astronaut narrative. First, when Van Beek asked Dogon elders about Sirius, most had never heard of Sirius B. The detailed astronomical knowledge Grial reported wasn't universally known among the Dogon. Second, Grial and Dieterlen began their research in the 1930s, decades after European schools, missionaries, and visitors had been present in Dogon territory. Western astronomy was already being taught in African schools. French astronomical societies were active. The discovery of Sirius B in 1862 was major scientific news. Third, Grial and Dieterlen's main informant, a blind elder named Ogotemeli, gave his account in 1946, after World War I and II brought Western soldiers, technology, and knowledge through the region. The skeptical explanation: the Dogon incorporated European astronomical knowledge into their existing rich cosmology, a process called cultural synthesis. They didn't learn about Sirius B from aliens. They learned it from Europeans, then wove it into their traditional stories, as cultures throughout history have done. But ancient astronaut proponents counter: even if some contamination occurred, how do we explain the depth and integration of this knowledge into Dogon ritual and art that appears much older? So what's the truth? Honestly, we don't know. The Dogon themselves have different accounts. Some elders tell the Sirius story. Others don't. Some say it's ancient knowledge. Others acknowledge European influences. What we do know: the Dogon have genuine, ancient astronomical traditions. They track stars for agricultural timing. They have a rich cosmology. European contact occurred before the research was conducted. And cultures everywhere have looked to the stars and told stories about visitors from the sky. Whether those visitors were extraterrestrial, mythological, or symbolic representations of natural phenomena, that interpretation reveals as much about us as it does about the ancient people who carved these stories in stone. The Mahabharata. The Ramayana. Ancient Hindu epics, thousands of years old. They describe something called vimanas, flying chariots, palaces, and machines. Vimana literally means measuring out or traversing in Sanskrit. The Mahabharata describes them in detail. A celestial car resembling the sun. It could go anywhere. It could go to the sky, the earth, and anywhere else. The car was as bright as the sun. It was big enough to hold many warriors. It made a sound like thunder. The Ramayana describes Ravana's Pushpaka Vimana, a flying chariot that shone like the sun and could move anywhere according to its pilot's will. Some passages describe aerial battles between gods using vimanas and powerful weapons that sound eerily like modern warfare. A single projectile charged with all the power in the universe. An incandescent column of smoke and flame as bright as 10,000 suns rose in all its splendor. It was an unknown weapon, an iron thunderbolt, a gigantic messenger of death which reduced to ashes. The corpses were so burned as to be unrecognizable. Ancient astronaut theorists read these passages and see nuclear weapons, aircraft, technology. But scholars of Sanskrit literature read them differently. On temple walls across India, we see carvings that might depict vimanas. Flying chariots pulled by animals, or are they jet engines? Gods standing in what looks like cockpits, or are they traditional throne designs? The problem with interpreting ancient art: we see what we expect to see. Show someone unfamiliar with modern technology a picture of an airplane, and they might describe it as a big bird or flying house. Show someone raised on science fiction these ancient carvings, and they see spacecraft. But in context, these reliefs show mythological scenes. Gods traveling through the heavens, which in Hindu cosmology is a real place, not outer space, but a divine realm. The flying vehicles aren't technological, they're magical. Manifestations of divine power. Like saying Zeus threw lightning bolts, or Thor wielded Mjolnir. We don't interpret those as descriptions of advanced weapons. They're symbols of divine power. On temple walls across India, we see carvings that might depict vimanas. Flying chariots pulled by animals, or are they jet engines? Gods standing in what looks like cockpits, or are they traditional throne designs? The problem with interpreting ancient art: we see what we expect to see. Show someone unfamiliar with modern technology a picture of an airplane, and they might describe it as a big bird or flying house. Show someone raised on science fiction these ancient carvings, and they see spacecraft. But in context, these reliefs show mythological scenes. Gods traveling through the heavens, which in Hindu cosmology is a real place, not outer space, but a divine realm. The flying vehicles aren't technological, they're magical. Manifestations of divine power. Like saying Zeus threw lightning bolts, or Thor wielded Mjolnir. We don't interpret those as descriptions of advanced weapons. They're symbols of divine power. So if the Vimanas weren't spacecraft, what were they? Scholars of Hindu literature offer a different perspective. The Mahabharata and Ramayana are epic poems. They're not historical accounts, they're mythology, theology, and moral teaching woven together. The Vimanas are literary devices. They show divine power. They move the plot. They demonstrate that gods exist on a different plane than mortals. In context, the Vimanas appear alongside other clearly mythological elements, gods with multiple arms, demons who change shape, mountains that fly, oceans that part. If we read the Vimana descriptions literally as technology, why not the rest? That said, ancient India did have incredible real technology. Advanced metallurgy, the iron pillar of Delhi has stood rust-free for 1,600 years. Sophisticated mathematics, they invented zero, decimal systems, and advanced algebra. Precise astronomy, they calculated planetary movements with remarkable accuracy. The technology was real. Just not extraterrestrial. Mohenjo-Daro. Indus Valley Civilization. Built around 2500 BCE. One of the world's earliest urban centers. Advanced city planning. Sophisticated drainage systems. And according to ancient astronaut theory, evidence of nuclear destruction. Some researchers claim. Skeletons found lying in the streets, as if killed instantly. Stones showing signs of vitrification, melting at temperatures only nuclear blasts achieve. Radiation levels above normal. The Mahabharata's description of a terrible weapon matches a nuclear explosion. If true, it would mean advanced nuclear warfare 4,500 years ago. But archaeologists who've worked at Mohenjo-Daro for decades say this is completely false. The skeletons? Found in different layers, different time periods, showing no signs of sudden death. The vitrification? Doesn't exist. No scientifically documented evidence of melted stone. The radiation? Background levels are normal. Claims of high radiation have never been verified by peer-reviewed studies. The city's abandonment? Likely due to climate change, river shifting, or gradual decline, not sudden destruction. The nuclear Mohenjo-Daro theory appears to be based on misinterpretation, exaggeration, and in some cases, fabrication. Yet it persists online because it's compelling. A nuclear war in ancient times would explain so much. But wanting an explanation doesn't make it true. Dendera, Egypt. The Temple of Hathor. Built during the Ptolemaic period, around 50 BCE. In a dark crypt beneath the temple, carved into the wall, a relief that sparked decades of controversy. It shows a large bulb-shaped object. Inside, what looks like a filament or snake. It rests on a pillar. Figures hold it with what might be insulators. Cables seem to connect to it. In 1992, engineer Peter Krasa and others proposed a radical theory. This is an ancient light bulb. The Egyptians had electricity. The image went viral. It appeared in documentaries, books, websites. The Dendera Light became evidence of lost ancient technology. Or forgotten visitors who brought that technology from the stars. But Egyptologists who can read hieroglyphs look at the same relief and see something completely different. The hieroglyphs surrounding the relief tell us exactly what we're looking at. It's not a light bulb. It's a jed pillar, a symbol of Osiris and stability. The bulb isn't a bulb. It's a lotus flower, a symbol of creation and rebirth in Egyptian cosmology. The filament isn't a filament. It's a snake, specifically, the snake form of the god Harsamtus, emerging from the lotus. The insulators aren't insulators. They're Hathor pillars and symbols representing the temple's architecture and cosmic order. The entire scene depicts a mythological moment, the sun god emerging from the lotus at creation, bringing light to the world. It's not describing technology. It's describing theology. Every symbol has clear meaning in Egyptian religious art. The lotus and snake motif appears throughout Egyptian iconography with the same symbolism. So why did engineers think it was a light bulb? Because they looked at it without context. They saw shapes that resembled modern technology and imposed that interpretation. This is confirmation bias in action. Some engineers went further. They asked, even if Egyptians meant it symbolically, could it actually work as a light bulb? They built reconstructions based on the Dendera relief. Attempted to create a working ancient Egyptian light bulb. The results? Mixed. With modern materials, vacuum tubes, electrodes, electrical current, they could create a glow-discharge lamp that superficially resembles the relief. But there's a problem: they had to use modern technology to make it work. The ancient Egyptians had none of these materials or knowledge. No evidence of copper wire suitable for conducting electricity. No evidence of the chemical knowledge needed for electrochemistry. No evidence of glassblowing techniques that could create vacuum-sealed bulbs. No evidence of any kind of electrical infrastructure, no power plants, no distribution systems, no electrical tools. The ancient Egyptians lit their temples and tombs with oil lamps and torches. We found thousands of them. We found soot marks on ceilings from their use. They had light. Just not electric light. The Dendera Light is a perfect example of how we can misinterpret ancient art when we don't understand the cultural context. This is confirmation bias, the tendency to interpret new information in a way that confirms what we already believe. If you believe ancient Egyptians had advanced technology, you'll see technology in their art. If you understand Egyptian symbolism, you'll see religious metaphor. Both people are looking at the same carving, but they see completely different things. This happens throughout ancient astronaut theory. We see helicopters in hieroglyphs, rockets in Pakal's tomb, spacesuits in cave paintings, because we live in a technological age. We think in terms of machines and spacecraft. Ancient peoples thought in terms of gods and myths and cosmic forces. The question isn't, what do we see? The question is, what did they intend? We asked archaeologists and epigraphers from around the world, what do you make of the ancient astronaut theory? Dr. Sarah Parcak, space archaeologist, these theories fundamentally misunderstand how archaeology works. We have millions of artifacts. They tell a consistent story of human innovation over time. There's no sudden injection of alien technology. Dr. John Baines, Egyptologist, the ancient astronaut interpretation takes Egyptian art completely out of context. Every mysterious carving makes perfect sense when you can read the hieroglyphs and understand the religious framework. Dr. Rosemary Joyce, anthropologist, these theories are often disrespectful to ancient peoples. They suggest humans couldn't have achieved great things without alien help. But humans have always been innovative, creative, and capable of extraordinary achievements. Dr. Simon Schaefer, historian of science, the idea that ancient peoples couldn't have developed their own technology says more about our modern biases than about ancient capabilities. But archaeologists also acknowledge there are genuine mysteries. We don't fully understand how some ancient technologies worked. We don't know the purpose of every artifact. But ancient astronaut researchers push back. Giorgio Tsoukalos, Ancient Aliens, we're not saying ancient people weren't smart. We're saying they had help. Knowledge was transferred from an advanced civilization, whether extraterrestrial or a lost human civilization. Graham Hancock, author, mainstream archaeology has blind spots. When evidence doesn't fit the accepted timeline, it gets dismissed. But what if the timeline is wrong? Eric von Daniken, I've never said I have all the answers. I'm asking questions. Why is that threatening? They argue that academic archaeology is too conservative, too slow to accept new evidence, too invested in existing theories. They point to cases where mainstream science was wrong and later corrected. They argue that extraordinary claims deserve investigation, not automatic dismissal. And they're right about one thing: the history of science is full of initially rejected ideas that turned out to be true. Continental drift. Meteorites. Bacteria causing ulcers. Heliocentrism. Sometimes the outsiders are right. But sometimes outsiders are right doesn't mean outsiders are always right. Every fringe theory deserves evaluation based on evidence, not on how appealing the story is. Here's what both sides actually agree on. Ancient peoples were far more sophisticated than popular culture suggests. The Egyptians, Mayans, Sumerians, Indians, Chinese, they had advanced mathematics, astronomy, engineering, and art. There are genuine mysteries. We don't fully understand how they accomplished some feats. The past is more complex than our textbooks present. New discoveries regularly change what we think we know. Where they differ is interpretation. Mainstream archaeology says, humans did this through innovation, trial and error, accumulated knowledge, and centuries of development. Ancient astronaut theory says, humans did this with help from extraterrestrial or lost advanced civilizations. Both explanations acknowledge human achievement. Both acknowledge mystery. The question is, which interpretation fits the evidence better? And do we need aliens to explain human ingenuity? So why do these theories captivate millions? Because mystery is thrilling. The unknown is fascinating. The possibility that we don't understand our own history is humbling and exciting. Ancient astronaut theory offers something academia often doesn't: wonder. It suggests the universe is full of intelligent life. That we're not alone. That our ancestors were part of something cosmic. It challenges authority. Questions the establishment. Gives voice to skepticism of mainstream narratives. And sometimes, asking uncomfortable questions leads to important discoveries. But there's a danger too. When we impose modern interpretations on ancient art, we erase the actual meaning those ancient people intended. When we attribute human achievement to aliens, we diminish human capability. When we stop asking, how did they do this, and instead say, aliens did it, we stop investigating. We stop learning. The real story, of humans developing agriculture, mathematics, writing, astronomy, art, and civilization through trial, error, innovation, and genius over millennia, that's extraordinary. More extraordinary, perhaps, than aliens handing us the answers. So what do the walls actually tell us? They tell us humans have always looked to the sky and wondered. They tell us ancient peoples created complex mythologies to explain their world. They tell us that art, religion, and storytelling have been fundamental to human culture for thousands of years. And they tell us there's still much we don't understand. Were ancient peoples visited by extraterrestrials? The evidence doesn't support it. But it's a question worth examining. Did ancient peoples develop sophisticated knowledge through their own ingenuity? Absolutely. And that knowledge was often more advanced than we give them credit for. Are there mysteries remaining? Yes. Archaeology is an ongoing process. Every year brings new discoveries that change our understanding. The ancient astronaut theory has done one valuable thing: it's gotten millions of people interested in ancient history. And maybe that's the point. Not whether aliens visited, but whether we're curious enough to keep asking questions, to keep examining the walls, and to keep listening, really listening, to what ancient peoples were trying to tell us. Not about aliens, but about themselves. Thank you for watching.